The legal battle surrounding Luigi Mangione took a dramatic turn this week after a New York judge dismissed the terrorism-related charges against him. Mangione, accused of murdering UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan last December, was initially facing some of the most serious terrorism enhancements ever applied in a state murder case. The ruling represents a huge setback for prosecutors and raises larger questions about the boundaries of terrorism laws in the United States. The case against Mangione. On December 4, 2024, Brian Thompson, CEO of one of the largest health insurance companies in the country, was gunned down outside a Midtown Manhattan hotel. Surveillance cameras showed a masked gunman approaching from behind and firing at close range before fleeing the scene. Within days, police arrested Luigi Mangione, a 27-year-old Ivy League graduate with a background in finance and a personal history that authorities claim revealed deep resentment toward the health insurance industry. When Mangione was caught in Pennsylvania a few days after the shooting, investigators say they found a backpack containing ammunition, disguises, and a notebook filled with anti-corporate rhetoric. In their view, this was more than a targeted killing, it was an ideologically motivated attack that amounted to terrorism. The charges. From the start, Mangione faced both state and federal charges. State case. New York prosecutors indicted him on 11 counts, including first and second-degree murder, weapons possession, and 2 counts carrying terrorism designations, murder in furtherance of an act of terrorism, and murder as a crime of terrorism. These enhancements were designed to elevate the case from a homicide into one meant to intimidate or coerce society at large. Federal case. Separate from the state indictment, federal prosecutors charged Mangione with crimes such as stalking, firearm offenses, and murder in aid of racketeering. These carry some of the harshest possible penalties, including life without parole or the death penalty. Together, the 2 cases represented one of the most aggressive legal pursuits of an accused killer in recent New York history. Why the terrorism charges were dismissed. On September 16, 2025, Judge Gregory Caro of Manhattan's criminal court ruled that the terrorism charges could not stand. He determined that the evidence presented to the grand jury was insufficient to support the required elements of terrorism under state law. New York's post-9/11 terrorism statutes are broad but clear. To qualify as terrorism, a crime must be committed with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of government, or affect government conduct through assassination, kidnapping, or similar acts. The judge found that while Mangione's writings and notebook revealed strong animosity toward the healthcare industry, prosecutors had not proven that his actions were intended to instill fear in a broader population or force policy changes. In other words, the murder of Brian Thompson appeared ideologically motivated, but the evidence did not elevate the act into terrorism as defined by law. What charges remain? The dismissal of the terrorism enhancements does not mean Mangione is walking free. He still faces second-degree murder. State. This remains the centerpiece of the state case, carrying a potential sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Federal charges. These are untouched by the state ruling and may actually pose the greater risk for Mangione. Federal prosecutors continue to pursue charges that could carry the death penalty. Pretrial hearings are scheduled to continue, with the next major court date in the state case set for December 1, 2025. Defense. Arguments. Mangione's defense team has argued that the state and federal prosecutions amount to an unfair doubling up of charges for the same alleged act. They have filed motions to suppress evidence found during his arrest, including his diary, backpack contents, and statements to police. They also claim the terrorism charges were politically motivated, designed to make an example out of Mangione by stretching the definition of terrorism too far. While the terrorism counts are now gone, these legal battles over evidence and constitutional rights will play a major role in the trials still to come. Prosecution challenges. For prosecutors, the dismissal was a serious blow. They had sought to frame the case as an act of domestic terrorism, a way of protecting society from a man who, in their words, was radicalized against corporate America and willing to act violently. By losing the terrorism enhancements, they now face the more straightforward but less symbolically powerful task of proving a murder charge. The federal government, however, still has tools at its disposal. Even if state prosecutors fail to convict, federal authorities could press forward with their own charges and penalties. Broader legal and social implications. The case raises pressing questions about how terrorism laws are applied in the U.S. Should the murder of a high-profile business executive, driven by ideological motives, count as terrorism? Or should terrorism be reserved for acts aimed at mass casualties or clear attempts to influence government policy? Critics of the terrorism enhancements say that applying the label too broadly dilutes its meaning and risks turning politically tinged crimes into overblown prosecutions. Supporters argue that ideologically motivated violence against a prominent target is precisely what terrorism statutes were designed to address. The dismissal highlights the difficulty courts face in drawing this line. Judge Caro's ruling suggests that, at least in New York, motive alone does not elevate a crime into terrorism unless there is proof of a broader coercive purpose. What comes next? With the terrorism charges dismissed, the focus now shifts squarely to the murder charge in state court and the looming federal case. The state trial will test whether prosecutors can convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt that Mangione intentionally and unlawfully killed Thompson. The federal proceedings may prove even more consequential, particularly if prosecutors seek the death penalty. For Mangione, the legal road ahead remains perilous. Even without the terrorism enhancements, he faces the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. For prosecutors, the case represents both a setback and an opportunity to prove their claims on narrower but still weighty grounds. And for the broader public, the outcome of this case may shape how we understand, and limit, the reach of terrorism laws in the years ahead.